Good afternoon. My name is William Dickerson. I'm a student at Southern University in the Graduate Study Program. Dr. Powell is glad to be able to discuss Chapter 7, Organizational Change and Innovation in Companies, consisting of change in different areas. I'm going to go about and give my just about what I received in Chapter 7, how I interpreted it, and how it made me feel. Basically, organizational change is any substantive modification into a system or into an area to some part of an organization. It can begin as such things as work schedules. It can also be departmentalization, where they change departments or change some type of certain instance that's in a department. It could be the span of management, the reach of management, the machinery, the organization itself. Some things that are forced by the change, but basically I'll go over the certain type of things. In certain organizations you might have where they change the schedule, where this company might have worked from early in the morning, they might start working in the evening. You might have certain type of management styles that have changed. You might have certain type of managers that have changed and they have moved on to a certain type of management for the company. Sometimes it's because it's a better fit for the company. Other times it's a force to continue to move on to be successful with the company. So that goes into the force of change. You might have an external force of change. Also, you might have an internal force of change. Example of an external force of change would be the product, would be the company itself, the opposition to the company, the internal, basically the other companies that work just like the company. Might be brand X that's forcing brand A to change how they do things. So it caused the organizational change within that company to survive. Some things that would change inside of an external organizational move is they would stop selling a certain product because it was a loss to the company. They might change where they build the product. They might move the whole plant. They might shut down a plant. You've seen that numerous times with certain products such as GM and other car makers, where they shut down a whole brand of a car just to keep the company afloat. They stopped and shut down, example, Pontiac. They shut down Hummer. They shut down a couple other brands that were successful. However, because the other brands that they had made them more money. However, like Buick was the number one seller in other countries. So it was resource for them to shut down the other brands that really wasn't successful, because the way the company designed itself now, it was a global company instead of an American company. So external forces forced that company to change some things that the organizational did. Internal organizational changes might be a change in management. CEO might have changed. So the new CEO has another idea of how he wants to work the company. He might want to change some things up. He might change the design of the buildings. He might change the design of the workforce, how the workforce acts, certain type of people he hires. That's internal change. Also inside organizational change, where he might move management around to certain different types of plans. He might use a different type of management style. He might believe in more skilled labor. So he would get rid of his unskilled labor. And he has a just for why he did that. So some things are that way because of external or internal forces, which is very important. Also, another thing we have to discuss with organizational changes is plan changes. Some changes are planned, some changes are not planned. Plan changes would be the design of a building. They might go to a different, such as example, automobile makers. They might go to making a different type of automobile at that plant. So they would shut down the plant and plan a change so they could build a different type of vehicle. That would be a plan change. That would be something where they would know we're going to do this at a certain time. This is going to happen. We're going to have certain people come in and move these certain things out and around. Unplanned changes would be something like basically what Ford is going through right now. Ford is going through a thing where they cannot find a chip to make their engines work in their vehicles and to sell these cars. So they didn't plan this on happening in 2019. So they pushed a certain amount of vehicles. However, now they have more product than they have sales with because of the supply problem in the supply chain. So it's an unplanned change. It's a reactive change. So what this company did, they stopped pushing out some of their vehicles. And if you notice, when you go through certain areas, such as the Ford lots, you only see 3 or 4 cars on their lot, and they are still calling some of their old customers to bring in some cars, telling them they will give top dollar for their used cars so they can keep these dealerships afloat, because these dealerships need income, and they can't have income if they don't have any product to sell. So that is a reactive change. A reactive change is a response to something that's going on in the external environment that they can't control, they can't circumvent through, and it's a circumstance that they didn't develop, but they have to move through with a certain process to get this to happen, to get this to be successful for them. So that's an unplanned change, which caused them grief. There's also steps in the change process. There's an Lewis model step, Levin model step that used to basically go about an organizational change, where it's unfreezing certain individuals, implementation of certain designs, referring to a reinforcement change. And this is a process that's required with some organizations. It's a process that was developed by a certain person, and what he came about with, he designed a certain way of acting to move about organizational changes. Managing that organizational change is basically what this is about with the Levin model. His name was Kurt Lewin. Is an organizational theorist. That's what he was. He suggested that every change requires certain steps, and those 3 steps is what I explained: unfreezing individuals who will be affected by the impeded change, leading the way to recognize why the change is necessary. The second step is implementing the change, and the third step would be also refreezing the system, reinforcing the system, making sure everybody understands. Prime example of that would be Caterpillar. Caterpillar used to make truck engines. However, due to the emission standards, in 2009, they stopped making truck engines. They make real good engines, and they didn't want to destroy their brand by making subpar engines, so they just stopped making them. They tried to sue the government, and they didn't win, so they just continued to make off-road engines. However, it changed the whole way their organization worked, the organizational structure. So they had to reorganize their structural basis on that situation. Another example of an organizational method to changing would be the comprehensive approach to change. That has 7 steps, specific steps to change. Recognizing the change, mapping, setting goals, diagnosis for what needs to be changed, selection of the technique to change it, implementation of change, actual implementation, and evaluation and follow-up of the change. You need these steps with this one also to make sure you have the correct and proper installation of organizational change. Organizational change is very important. It can make and break an organization, as if the change is not in a structured mode, it would bring total chaos to a situation, and you might have people that would vie for steps or vie for change that they would feel needy to get to. It would help them. Maybe certain people would take certain steps to move in a place that they didn't need to be in. However, they would vie for the change because they feel it would benefit them. And also, while you're doing change, you might have resistance to the change. So you have to understand the resistance to the change. Some people feel uncertainty of having a new situation, not knowing how to go forward with this new situation. The biggest cause of employee uncertainty is change. Some people work in a certain industry forever, and then there's change coming in. They feel that they might lose their job. They might have a downsize, and they might not be the same person. It'll affect their income. It'll affect their life. So uncertainty is another thing that people don't like. They'll buck against organizational change. Threaten self-interest. Self-interest might be this guy might have planned to work for this company for 20 years, and now he's not going to work for this company for 20 years because we have an organizational change is moving him to Timbuktu, and he didn't want to move to Timbuktu, so he feels threatened by this, and his self-interest is not aligned with the information or the organizational change that is coming forth from that organization. These self-interests have caused this company to move a different way, and it's affecting his self-interest, so he doesn't like the way this company is moving. And different perceptions is another value that causes people to have uncertainty and resistance to change. Their perception of what they think is going to happen is different from the perception of the organization and the CEO's idea of what they feel they want to change with the organization, because it's not in the best interest of the organization to let that person move on with the situation. I believe different perceptions can cause confusion within a situation of organizational change. It could cause other companies to take advantage of a company's disorganization of not having their situations aligned, meaning their workers understanding what's going on. I believe perception is very important. Everybody needs to be on the same team. Everybody needs to have a focus goal. I think you can solve the perception problem by explaining to people that they will not lose their job. I feel you should try to keep all your workers. I believe that's why you vet your workers when you hire them, so they can have a mindset that will benefit the company and benefit the CEO and benefit everybody at once. Feelings of loss is another way that people hinder organizational change. They feel they'll lose something. They'll lose their work arrangements. They might like where they live and they might have to move to another city. So this feeling of loss will cause them to go against what people want to happen with the company. So they have a resistance to change. And a lot of this change is basically perception of what people feel will be better for the company than what will be better for themselves. So overcoming resistance to change is certain things that people can do. Participation. Let people have an idea what you want to do, what they feel will be the best for that company at the time. Participation is very important in companies. You need people to understand that this company is here for the long run. I think if you let people feel important and let them know that this is the plan, even if it's not going to benefit them, let them understand that this is what we're doing. This is the idea that we want to go for. We're just trying to benefit us and not, don't have them with the idea that you're just benefiting yourself, you're benefiting the company, but you want to work with them in the long run. Maybe give them an option to buy out or get an early retirement for the people that's been there a while. I noticed a lot of companies offer packages where people can leave the company, and if they didn't take the package, then they would suffer. So a lot of people feel lost. Like some people might have worked at a company for 20 years and all of a sudden it's their life around the company and the company is no more. So a feeling of loss will cause people to be not receptive of the problem of having this go on. Participation is another key to that, with that. So you would have to have these people feel special. Maybe you can help them change their career. It's a lot of things you can do with companies when you have organizational changes. However, I feel you should try to keep all your company, even if it's possible to continue to help these people along in their life. Education is another one. Education and communication is another one to help people get better without having so much resistance to change. Further education of that person, maybe you could send them back to school so they can have a better opportunity with the company. If they were just a blue collar worker, maybe they could get into management, maybe into supervisor through the experience that they had with the company. I feel that's another good thing we can use with this area of organizational change. I received this also from the lesson. Changing the organizational structure will cause resistance from the bottom. It might cause resistance from the top because you have a power struggle. Changing the technique and the comparatives of how companies work, changing people's attitudes and behaviors is another thing with organizational change you'll run into. Changing the business practices and processes that people use when working in these companies is another thing organizations will go through when they have organizational change. I believe organizational change is very important. Innovation is another thing that causes organizational change. You might have a product that's innovative and has taken over the market, such as cell phones. You might have worked at a company that built payphones, and now you work where your product is not innovative anymore, is not of success, is not needed by anybody. So you have changed everything about your business, and your company has to adapt. So they have bought out your business and you are not available anymore, and they will not move you. So basically you are a victim of innovation. And with that, the company would have to figure out what they want to do with these employees, what they want to do with the products, what they want to do with the business line. So innovation can cause organizational change. Innovation has been the victim of a lot of companies, the successor of a lot of businesses. And as of today, you have a lot of companies that are going out of business because of innovation. They are being bought out with other companies. And you have a lot of employees that are trying to find new ways to be successful. I think innovation is a good thing. Innovation has a very important stance with organizational change. I believe every company should be abreast of organizational change. I believe the best thing that companies can do is stay ahead of the curve. And how you stay ahead of the curve is being innovative. You cannot let yourself become complacent. You cannot become like a dinosaur in the business world, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So organizational change is basically when a company gets in the forefront and they take an aggressive approach to keep their company sustainable. A lot of major companies are forced into organizational changes by the boards. The boards want to make profit for the investors, and investors want to seek success. So that company will get ahead of the curve and say, we will change our organization, we'll revamp our organization, we will move things in a certain way to make them feel successful, because investors like to feel comfortable. So innovation process and efforts are very important when you come about with change for certain individuals. You might have a certain app that's on a phone, and you can see that's the basic of innovation, and it will cause a whole organization to change. I believe companies such as Amazon are very important because of their innovation apps. You have certain apps that are launched and they make these products very easy to use, very attainable. And the app on the phone is very important to this organization. If the app didn't work, this organization wouldn't work also. So one prime example of a company that redefined themselves constantly and has different changes throughout the organization is Amazon. Amazon is basically redesigning itself right now. They're setting themselves up for the 22nd and 23rd century. I think that's the reason why the CEO stepped down in a way, so the organization could revamp itself and remold itself and rebrand itself. I don't see too many other companies at an aggressive pace to change up the whole organization, the attitude, the business structure, the business plan, such as Amazon. Amazon came into the door almost like service merchandise. However, service merchandise is not known anymore, and Amazon is very known. And they have a whole foothold in every type of business you can name. And they also sell every type of product that you can name. They have more brick and mortar business products now, but no stores where people actually can walk in a store and buy a product. And that's a different thing that many companies don't have. I notice a lot of companies, since this pandemic has went on, have organized themselves in a certain way. They have created changes due to necessity to keep their business afloat. That was an external force. They didn't plan it. They couldn't control it, but they had to survive and they had to motivate through it. They had to circumvent through it. So a lot of these companies are forcing themselves to have change. And I noticed some of these companies have gotten rid of upper management and CEOs who couldn't adapt and couldn't make the business owners and the investors feel comfortable dealing with change. So organizational change is very important, even from previous lessons. Organizational change is based on basically the business plan. Also, it's based on how the company functions, how the investors, how the chairman, and how the CEO and the upper management see the basis of future for that company. If they don't have a good idea of what they feel is successful for that company might fail. So I believe it's very important that you have organizational change. Sometimes organizational change cannot be radical. It cannot be to the point where it could damage the company. However, you have to make a decision, and the decision has to be made wisely. Time is also of the essence when doing organizational changes, because if it becomes too complicated, you can also have mutiny within your company. And like we discussed further, resistance to organizational change can also be detrimental to a company, because you can have some very important employees that you can get rid of, and they can go to your competitor and give trademark secrets and very important information that you wouldn't want to have spread all over to that individual, to that company. So I believe organizational change is a delicate situation. It's a situation that needs to be taken care of in a precise manner, also with a white glove, because you can upset people with the assimilation of a certain type of organizational change that can cause corruption to your brain. It can cause mutiny to your brain. It can also cause detriment, harm to your brain when you bring in people that might not be what your organization deems successful, and they might take your brain to a place you don't want it to be with. So it's very challenging. It's a very challenging situation, especially for companies that are big and want to bring about complete organizational change. Some companies will get rid of everybody from the CEO down, and the new CEO might not have the same ideas of success. He might have fabricated some products, that some ideas to make this company successful, and they might not work, and he will move on, and the company will suffer in the end. Therefore, the employees will suffer in the end, the investors will suffer in the end. So organizational change is a very detailed approach. It's a very delicate situation that needs to be taken care of. It has to be very delicate when dealing with, especially planned organizational changes. Planned organizational changes are very dangerous because of all the organizational change, these are the ones that people choose to get into. Some companies have no choice when it's an unplanned organizational change where they have to move due to products being different, organizations having setbacks, like Ford is having a setback now. That's an unplanned change. It's a change due to the pandemic, which happened in 2020, and it has caused businesses to move in a total different light. A lot of automobile companies are suffering gravely right now due to not being able to have supply of the products they need to make their business better. However, these products are very important, and they need these products to survive. People need vehicles. Some people believe that if they don't have a new vehicle, they won't be able to make it. So used vehicles have become very popular now, and these new vehicles are not there. So the used products have went up, and you have seen used car lots make dramatic success due to them not having as much overhead as a new company, a new car company, where the new car company has to sell a certain volume of vehicles to make the bottom line meet. Where this used car company might only have to sell 3 vehicles and to make a profit. So it's a very tricky situation. I really wanted to see what some of these companies will do, because it's kind of like with the automobile industry. They are a victim of their own success. They have put their own self behind the 8 ball by putting out certain products and being determined to use certain products that they had no control over how they got the product. The problem with the automobile industry and why they are forced to organizational change is because these products are coming from a country that America doesn't own, basically, in a way of saying it. They have no control of how they get the product. I'm sure they tried, but they not getting the product as fast as they want due to whatever foreseen inference. They don't have control over it. So with that being said, they don't have the vehicles to sell. They have a lot of demand for the vehicles, but not a lot of supply. And with economics, that will cause a downturn. Also inflation, where the prices will probably increase for new vehicles because of the demand. This is my interpretation of organizational change. I think organizational change is good in certain instances, but most organizations, if they do want change and they want successful change, have to be ahead of the curve. They have to get ahead of the ball, and planned organization is very dangerous. Planned organizational changes are very dangerous to certain companies because of the organizational change might not be in theory what it needs. Thank you.